Hi everyone, welcome to our Tuesday tips. We are carrying on with our overlocker basics. Now up to now I've taken you through the 4-thread and 3-thread. When will I work with it? We've also covered our differential and also cutting width. Now the next part that I really wanted to discuss with you is how do you end and how do you begin if we are doing seams. Remember I mentioned that when I am sewing on my overlocker, especially with knits, I don't go to my sewing machine. I literally go and do the whole garment on my overlocker. Even the knit top that I'm wearing at the moment, I've actually done everything on my overlocker. Now you've got to be aware that that overlock stitch, if I go and cut it right next to my fabric, it's going to unravel, especially when I'm opening up that that seam and I'm pressing it. It is going to start unraveling a little bit, and we want it to be secure. Obviously when I'm doing the hem and all of that and it's folded over, that's not going to be really an issue. But sometimes I like to work with the fabric as well, where I leave the raw edges. The fabric allows me to actually not do a hem, and it looks better if I'm not doing a hem on that certain fabric. Now I wanted to show you just a way that you can start and end. A lot of people will start and then they take a bigger needle or a wool needle and they'll pull that thread in under the stitches or in between the two layers of fabric. They can do that. Some of us go and we even just knot it a little bit. But I just wanted to show you another way that you can actually do it on your overlocker all in one go as well. So with that, I'm also going to show you another thing as well. I see so many people that start on, if we're especially doing, let's say we're sewing in the round, I'm doing a hem for my trousers or anything like that, and we all see that little roof because they start skew and they come onto their fabric, and at the end when they go off, they literally just go off. So we've always got that little bit of a roof or that point that's in that hem that we, or that seam that we've just gone, I don't really want to say seam, guys, just where on the edge, that's it, on the edge where we're going to finish it. So I just want to show you what I do there as well. There's also a little tip there which will always give you perfect edges if you are going to sew. And then another thing I think that I must show, I wasn't going to show it to you, but as I'm thinking here by myself, I'm just thinking turning corners. Because sometimes some of us are doing, again, we're leaving a raw edge. I might be doing table linen or anywhere where I literally just need to do a nice corner, and I don't want to sew off and then start sewing again from the, from this way, and then I've got these two pieces of thread that I've got to work away. We can literally go and do those corners all in one. So let me show you that as well. So let's go to our overlocker now, and remember you are doing a reference file. I would really like it if you can also go and do these samples. Some of them you are going to have to practice if you're not used to it. If it's totally new to you, it's going to take you a couple to get used to it. But again, it's like anything else, it's practice. The more you're going to do it, the easier it's going to become. Okay, now we're going to do the end and start on our machine. As I mentioned, that you can go and tie it off, you can take a needle and you can also work that thread away, but sometimes it's just easier to do it on the overlocker in one go as well. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to start working, and I wanted to actually, I don't remember if I mentioned this to you, if I work, you will always see I don't lift my whole presser foot. With overlockers, we can literally just lift the toe of the foot and I slide my fabric in. Just make sure that your blade, the top blade or the upper blade, is just a little bit higher so that I can actually slip it in to where the blade area is going to be. Sometimes when we do start on the right in front of the presser foot, and especially if it's knit or a thicker fabric like our fleece, that top fabric does move a little bit and we actually don't end up with an even seam. So I always make sure that I just lift it and I put it under the presser foot so that it grips it. And I can go in even a little bit more. There we go. Now I'm just going to sew a couple of stitches and then I'm going to stop. We just do, literally I'm just on the fabric and I'm going to stop, and let me just go with my needle up again. I'm going to take this thread and I'm going to just go and I'm literally pulling this thread. Can you see I'm almost taking that loops out? I'm almost making it as if it's a straight, just a piece of straight thread over there, and I bring it over my fabric and I bring it across of that, in front of that needle. I'm trying to move my hands out and I'm just bringing it across. I'm going to literally sew this into my stitches now. So I'm going to put my foot down. And there I've already cut it. It's long enough for me to be sewn in at the bottom, and you'll see it just now when I show you the sample. Now when I get to the end, to actually stop that from unraveling as well, don't sew off the fabric. I really want to stop right on the edge of my fabric. And I can maybe go and do one more stitch by hand, and then I'm going to lift up the needle. I'm lifting up my foot, and here I just want to take away this area. I just wanted to show you what I'm doing. I'm just opening up. I'm going to just release my threads a little bit, just a little bit, so that I can move my fabric. And all I'm going to do, I can move it, I'm flipping it over, and I'm putting it back under my needle. I'm almost going to sew back. Remember, we haven't got a reverse stitch on our overlocker, but I do want to do a couple of stitches back, and that's all I'm doing. And I had to release the thread a little bit, otherwise it's quite tight. And now I flipped it, and I can go and I can just pull my threads a little bit tight on the top again. Remember, now we don't want to cut. If I'm going to cut, I'm actually going to cut the threads or my looper threads right on the edge. So I've either got to guide it right next to the blade. In my case, just to make it easier for you to see, I'm going to move it out of the way, and I'm lining this edge up with my bottom blade. My finger is playing quite a big part. I can see that I'm lining up on there, and I'm getting it right at the bottom where the needle will be on the edge of my fabric. And this you've got to practice. I'm just going to get it so it's just positioning it correctly there for myself. There we go. And I just put my needle back in. We don't want to damage our machines, guys. So if ever you move your blade away, you've got to be careful. You can't get this fabric going into your loopers. You're going to damage your loopers. I really want it just on the edge of my foot where I was sewing. It's on that edge of that bottom blade as well. So please be aware. And take caution if ever you move your blade away. This is not easy, it's only a small part we're doing, but if you are going to ever move your blade away because you don't want to cut the edge, you've already done something on the edge, don't go over to the looper side. It's so easy to damage our loopers. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to now, and I'm just positioning it right on that. And remember, we spoke about a stitch finger. I'm watching my stitch finger to make sure I'm not going to get too many loops. I want to make sure my fabric is positioned correctly on that stitch finger. And all I do a couple of stitches back. I lift my foot up. I turn it to the back like that. It's a 90-degree angle that I've taken it. And I sew off. All right. You can go and put fray check there if you want to. I'm just cutting it off like that now so that we can I just want to get all my threads off there. There we go. So we can see that I've just sewn back a little bit. I've just pulled it a little bit there now, but this is not going to come undone in this area. Look at that. It's a nice secure stitch that I have there. Where I started as well, I've literally just pulled this thread in under my stitches, and the stitches have sewn it in there, so there is just no way that we are going to go and we're going to have the unraveling. Now the next step that I wanted to show you is when I'm sewing, let's say it's a hem and I'm going to be sewing in the round. Now remember when I mentioned that little roof, some people start right off the fabric almost, and then when they go all the way around and they go off, and we're literally seeing that edge sticking out over there. And then when they go in hem, let's say this is a hem and I'm folding it over, can you see that corner that we're getting there? We don't want that. We want a nice neat hem. Now in order to do it, I've got to know how much am I going to be cutting off when I am going to be overlocking. Now I went and I actually just cut out a little gap for myself. Where this line is there, that's basically where my blade is going to carry on cutting all the way around, because that's the amount that I want to cut off. And another thing that you've got to realize with overlockers, we do want to cut off a little bit, even if it's just a small little piece that we're cutting off. Some people skim and they just cut the fluff off. Now we've had a customer in our Benina store that was skimming all the time, and when she was skimming, the fluff builds up on the inside, and she eventually jammed. I'm just going to turn this so you can see. She actually, with all the fluff building up, the fluff buildup actually went into this little area over there. Can you see where that top looper is moving through? And she had such a buildup of fluff in there with the skimming of the fabric that it actually jammed the machine, that we couldn't turn the flywheel anymore. It wouldn't turn, and it had to go to our technician. And they then told us that that is the situation, what happened. And they said, please don't skim. And that's from our technician now. They said, don't skim. You always want to cut off a little bit. Just make sure, even if it's a tiny little piece of fabric that we're cutting off, we have to cut off. So that's just a tip from our technicians that services all our machines as well, so that you know you've got to cut off a little bit. But now I'm going to start with this. I want to move my needle all the way into this area. My blade is in the way, that's why it will make that little roof. As soon as I push this in, my blade's got to start cutting, and this is in the way. So I want a nice smooth beginning and end, and that's why I went and I cut away there. Now to start, the first thing I want to do, I want to throw off my thread. Otherwise, it's also going to fold in my fabric a little bit. Remember, the thread is still sitting there on that stitch finger. And all you're going to do, you're going to take your thread. Don't pull too hard. I'm just holding onto it to the back. I'm turning my flywheel away from me. I'm literally turning it backwards. Remember, if the stitch is forming, my flywheel turns forwards. Now I'm going to just turn one stitch back, and I'm just going to do one rotation so my needle goes down. And when it goes up, I can literally feel it releasing. Can you see? You can see there's no stitches there. It literally released it. If it feels, and you can see I can just pull it. So anytime I jam my machine as well, I would stop. I don't force my fabric out. I go and I turn the flywheel backwards. If the fabric is in there and you've really jammed it badly, then go and cut the threads where you can and still hold on to your fabric. Then do that backwards or away from you movement with the flywheel, and you'll immediately feel it release. If I just try and force my fabric out, again, I can damage my loopers, I can break a needle. So we've got to be aware of all of that. Remember, any overlocker out there, your loopers isn't part of your guarantee. The looper is really something that will get damaged if we are doing something wrong, if we are forcing our fabric through, if we moved the blade away and I've gone too far into the looper area. All of that can damage our loopers. But because it is really, it's a user error when we damage our loopers, loopers is really not part of your guarantee. It's not part of the mechanics of the machine that they will guarantee. Now I'm going to go and show you what to do. So now for starting, I'm just going to move that section that I've cut off. I'm moving it under my needle and my presser foot, and I'm sliding it in. The front where I've cut out is in front of my blade, so that I can also get the blade nice and close on that edge. Look at your stitch finger. I've told you about the stitch finger, so always make sure that it's lying on the stitch finger and not past the stitch finger. Sorry, I'm trying to not be in the way when I'm doing this, and I keep moving my fabric. All right, and I can go and put it down. Again, you will see when I work with a hem, I work and so that I can remove the excess fabric that way. I won't put it in the other way around, so that I've got to try and get the excess fabric from the bottom. That also gives me a chance of actually making a mistake and cutting some of my fabric or sewing it into the seam. This way, I know it's out of the way and we are not going to sew it in. Now all I'm going to do is sew in the round. I'm just going to keep cutting off that same amount that I wanted to cut off. I can go and I can just cut that off as well for now. Can you see how easy it is to move and to actually keep the fabric out of the way? Now you've got to be aware. This is where we started, and look how nice and straight I started on that edge. So I want to sew and just do a couple of stitches over that area, and then I'm going to sew off. I'm not going to sew off by moving my fabric out of the way that way. Remember, I take my fabric and I literally turn it 90 degrees, and then I can go and sew off. So I'm just making sure I'm lining up this area. Don't cut your stitches you've already got here. So now we've got a guide again next to the blade, or just move your blade out of the way for these couple of stitches. I'm going to try and just guide it like that, so that, and I can lift if I feel I'm going to get loose stitches off the edge, my little lashes. I literally lift this and I can maneuver my fabric and control my fabric. I just want to make sure, guys, sorry, I hope I'm not in the way. Just want to go over that area, and then remember what I can do. I'm going to lift, I'm going to move it backwards like that with 90-degree angle, and there we go, and I literally just go and sew off. And now what you will see is that where I started, I've actually got quite a nice smooth edge for my start and my finish. And then when I am going to be doing my hems and I'm folding it over, can you see I've got a nice straight line that I am working with. So if we look at it now, we've done the start and the end, we've done sewing in the round. Now the next one that I want to do with you is really, if we are going to be, let's say we're doing table linen. Sometimes I use this on the clothing that I'm sewing with, depending on what I'm doing, especially if it's a cardi and I'm going to go all the way, you know, around the neck area, all the way to the bottom of the hem and going around the hem area as well. I turn corners, I don't sew off my fabric, and that is really what I wanted to show you here. Now we are going to start sewing. Now when I get to this edge, I want to carry on to that area. I'm just going to do one corner to show you, but as soon as I turn, because I'm cutting off a little bit, I have to accommodate for what I'm cutting off. If I've cut off, let's say 6 millimeters, I'm just taking an amount, or just about half a centimeter, when I turn, I still want to cut off half a centimeter there as well. And if I sew all the way to the edge and I'm turning, then I'm not cutting away on that area. I have to accommodate. So I'm going to be sewing, I'm sewing. When I get here, I want to actually have that cut out already for me to start. So all I'm going to go and do, whatever the amount is that I'm cutting off, I'm going to be doing it on this corner. So let's go back. You'll see once we sew it. There we go. Let's just get that little bit there as well. There we go. So can you see now? I'm sewing. I'm going to turn a corner. This is allowing for my blade to be next to that area, and then my blade can start carrying on. If I was doing this corner as well, then if I'm turning this way, I would be cutting off this corner as well. I've got to accommodate the blade to be against it. As soon as I don't give the blade a place to carry on cutting, I'm either not going to cut away, or again, I'm not going to get a straight seam that I'm going to be working with. Now all we're going to do, I'm placing it under, and I'm going to be cutting off the same amount that I've given myself a gap there. Again, please don't sew off the fabric. I want to stay on, so I'm just going to do, okay, and I'm happy where we are there. Now I've got to turn the corner. I'm going to lift it up. I'm just pulling a little bit so that I pull it off the stitch finger. That's why I'm pulling it. I'm not pulling it sideways, backwards, so the stitch just slides off that stitch finger that we've already spoken about. And now I can go and I put that cut edge right against my blade. And I'm making sure I start on the edge of my fabric, and I can maneuver it. And I'm just going to see I am on the edge. I can just go in one stitch. And now I can carry on sewing. Again, if I was going to turn this corner, I would have given myself a little gap so that I can move it and go snug against the blade. I'm just going to go off. And there we've just turned our corner with our sewing. So I can literally go all the way around, and this is lovely when we're also doing decorative work. I can go and put decorative thread into my loopers for table linen, for instance, and I can go and sew all the way around and go around the corner, and only at the end is basically, if I've gone all the way around, this is the only place where I've got to worry about securing. I don't have to worry about securing on any of these corners. So this is really something that I do use quite a bit. And I want you to go play with this, go practice. And remember, can you see I didn't cut away here? If I had to carry on here now, my blade will be on the edge. It's not cutting away the amount that I want to cut away. And then I've either got to try and go inwards again to keep the same square block. If I'm cutting away, let's say my 6 mil or 1/4 inch all the way around. So we always have to think of, where's the blade going to push? Have I got space to turn and move it against the blade? Because really, if you look at it, if that was cut out again there, I'm just going to show you, if we are cut out there, and I'm pushing it in, my blade is sitting there, right in that gap that I've given it, and then my blade just carries on cutting on that area as well. So guys, these are really nice must know, I would say, almost must know techniques if you are going to be working with your overlocker. And again, I'm more a fashion sewer. I love sewing garments, but you can bring this into anything. You can be making cushions, you can be making table linen, handbags, whatever you're working with. Remember, this is really giving us a nice finish, and this is still part of the basics, but with our next steps in our next video, I'm actually going to take you more on doing decorative work now with our overlocker. We've covered all the basics that we need to know. Now it's for you to go and practice and to actually see how it works on your fabric and just put into place what I've shown you now, and you would then be able to really get nice finishes every time you're going to use your overlocker. By now, I hope that you are actually more, let's say, on good terms with your overlocker. We've really got to just understand what we can do, how we can set in our overlocker, and then you can go and do anything with this overlocker of yours. Honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, if I work with knits, this is what I'm working on. It's seldom that I do go to my sewing machine because this makes it so much easier for me. This is just, once you know the sewing techniques as well, which we're going to cover in the next part, like our gathering, like our flat locking, all of that, you're going to just say, wow, I never knew my overlocker can do this. And that is the aim of all these tips and techniques. I want you to understand your overlocker, to see that it's actually not that difficult once you know what it can do and what it does offer you when you are sewing. So go ahead now and go and do these samples for me. Remember, it's going to take practice. You're not just going to get that square corner right the first time, and I don't want you to give up as well. I want you to go and practice it. Go and do 3 or 4, take some scraps and go and practice it. But once you do understand how to do that, I can tell you, you're going to get it right every time. If you've got any questions, as always, you are welcome to email me on elsabie@schroeferdesigns.co.za, and I will also put my Facebook pages for you in the information box at the bottom. I want you to go and subscribe to my Facebook pages, and there I will always put out notifications as well, so that you know when I am loading all these tips and techniques videos for us, and you can immediately go and have a look at it. And then again, also subscribe to my channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, remember, you just go and click on the subscribe and also put on notifications so that you will be notified every time I go and load a video. But for now, please go play with your overlocker, make friends with your overlocker. And I'm saying that because in our store, this is the first thing that we always hear when someone comes in with an overlocker, that I'm scared of my overlocker, that I don't know how to thread my overlocker, I don't know what to do with the overlocker. And there's no reason, guys. There is just no reason why you have to be scared of the overlocker. You can go and play with it and just make amazing stuff from here on out now. So from us now, that was really all the information that I wanted to give you in this video. And I hope that you're going to enjoy it the rest of your week and that you're going to get a lot of sewing done.